Hi, welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
I'm Andrea Goyan, and today we are so thrilled to have Ai Jiang joining us. So, Ai's career is meteoric. She entered the speculative fiction market in 2021 and since then has won Ignyte, Nebula, and Bram Stoker awards. And her stories have been nominated for Locus, Aurora, British Science Fiction Association, Hugo, and the Astounding Award for Best New Writer. In the past few years, she's had over 50 stories, numerous poems, a novella, a novelette, and her new novel, A Palace Near the Wind, published. And we're here today to learn more about how she does it all. Hi, and welcome.
Welcome. Welcome. And before we get started, could you show us your kitten co-writers?
I will try, but thank you so much for having me. All right, let's
So
see if he
excited
will come
about
up
it.
here.
Oh, yes,
Well,
being a
he
cat.
is guarding the door.
Ah, we can
But
see
this is,
the tail.
yes, yes. But we have Owl and Phantom. She is currently off camera because she's very camera shy, but she is like just off to my left.
Well,
And does he
Phantom's a
guard
good
the door
name,
to
right?
does he guard the door to keep you private while you're writing so no one disturbs you?
Yes.
That
Except
his job.
sometimes he's the one disturbing me.
That's oh so true. Mine sits on my lap every morning demanding. I mean, it's just like, oh my God, so much love. Um, so I just finished your amazing novel, and I would love to chat with you a little bit about it. Um, in the back, you give some really good information about how it came to be and really lovely what would that be called? Not an acknowledgement, but a writer's note at the end. And I wanted to ask you how it evolved from your initial idea, which you sort of talked about being a Bluebird-esque retelling, to where it is now. Was that your evolution? Did it happen with your editors? Anything you want to add about that?
So I would say the theme and inspiration kind of evolved organically, but also unconsciously, in that it first began with like the whole Bluebeard as industrialism and then the wives as nature. But then I was reading a lot about climate change and like environmental impact articles back then as well about how like tourism was impacting the environment, but then there were some um, economies that were like thriving based on tourism. And
Mhm.
then at the same time, my grandmother, so she lives on a rural side in China where there were a lot of old villages that existed for a long time. But then this was like back in 2021 or so. Um, the government wanted to tear down the villages and put a bunch of condos in its place, but it would drastically change like the community dynamics and how they kind of um, communicate and interconnect back then. And that was something I think that unconsciously works its way into my book. And that like when I was creating the hollows of Feng Society, they are kind of described as almost like living trees, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
that the trees
Yeah.
themselves live within. Yeah, and kind of open and closed. So you can kind of see into them. So they're like semi-private, but not completely private. And it feels a lot like my grandmother's community as well. It's like you all have your own homes, but everyone can kind of see into each other's homes and know each other's businesses. Where whereas when you have something like condos, it's much more private, right? You have your individual units, and I feel like that kind of reflected in the way that I presented the palace. Every door is very closed off. There are long stretches of hallways. No one's really like coming in and out, compared to like the community rural villages, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It's so nice to know that information because it's definitely inspired it. I mean, I definitely read that and now it makes sense to me in a completely different way. Um, I wondered when I look at the cover, which is a you can't almost doesn't catch because it's gold, stunning cover. And there will be a link below where you can buy this. Um, I wondered because the main character whose name I cannot try to pronounce, you can tell me how to say it and I'll forget like that. Um, but I wondered, she is a tree person. She is covered in bark and needles. So how did they come about doing this beautiful novel with this young woman that looks totally human? How was that decision? It's so pretty. I mean, it's stunning. But how did that decision come about?
I feel like it's always so fascinating when you are working with artists in like bringing to life your vision. It's kind of like when you put out your book into the world and you get a whole ton of different interpretations of what you have written by different readers, right? So not just for this book, but for my previous books, you would have people saying, oh no, this is like a dystopian book. Oh no, this is a fantasy book. Oh no, this is so such and such, right? And I feel like it is very similar with like art too, when you give like a artist a specific brief and they take it and then they make their own interpretations of it. So if you stare like very closely at the cover, you can see that she has bark texture.
She has
Like
what
on
kind of
her skin,
texture?
bark texture on her skin. Like the
Oh,
way if
okay.
you shave down the bark, you can see the inner text, like the inner design of the wood.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. No,
So
it's stunning. But yeah. So so in your process of writing, how did you develop did how much what's the question I want to ask? Um Talk about a little bit, if you don't mind, your editing process with your editors. And did they influence a lot of that shift, or had you already made that shift into this story versus the Bluebeard story by the time you gave it to them?
so this book, oh, it went through a lot. So I had written about like the first half of it as like my master's thesis and then finished it up before handing it to my agent. So when I handed it to my agent, a lot of like the smaller subplots of the book did not exist and they were added in later on. But by the time it made it to my editor, we didn't do too much editing because by that time it was like 8 drafts in, and my editor mainly edited for like consistency or like expansion.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but like my very first draft for this book was something like 25,000 words or so. And then as like the 8 drafts went on, we eventually got to like 47,000 before cutting it down to keep it within the novella range at like 39. So a lot of what you see now, it was a lot sparser before. I think it's because I used to write short fiction. So I like to keep everything very compact, and like everything in like backstory that gets brought out rather than like present story only.
So
It,
is this considered novella length or novel length?
Novella length. So I think the final
That's
word
what
count was something like 39,600 words.
do
okay.
you said you started with short stories basically, which probably most people do, I think, uh, rather than just jump to a novel. Do you feel like you more switched, or are you still just going back and forth?
I I've been going back and forth because I had a lot of shorts solicited for anthologies that I like kind of spread out throughout the year. So I'm writing like a short or two every 1 to 2 months. But I have discovered that the switch back and forth has been really hard. Like before, it was very natural for me to like just write short stories back to back. And it would go very quickly. But now that I switch into long form, it's like a very different sort of mentality and state of mind to be in. So my short stories have gotten like harder to write, but they've also gotten longer because I went into long form, I think. But then yeah, so it's been hard because when I first started long form, I tried to write it the same way as a short story. And I realized it was not sustainable because each sentence became really, really dense. And by the time I was like 10% into the book, I'm like, this book is done. We are done here.
With this, I'm going to talk one more time about Palace Near the Wind. The ending left itself open for a sequel. Do you see yourself going back into this world?
So this is planned as a duology when it's sold. So the second book is coming out April 2026, and it will
Yeah.
be the end of the series. But I had planned for it to be like two very different books and very different voices, but set in the same world. In that one, like book one, A Palace Near the Wind, is set more so in the palace and on the side of Feng. And then book two is set on the other side of the wall, following a different character.
Nice. That'll be great. I
The
look forward to
same
that.
timeline though, or different timeline? I mean, period.
So it's like slightly before the end of Palace, and then continue onwards.
So one
When
of
you,
my, go ahead, Elizabeth.
oh,
You
I
still have
was,
some time.
so you were doing a lot of research on climate. Uh, how do you keep from getting depressed?
Mm.
Whenever I tell, like people are like, "Oh, you are like so optimistic." I was like, I think I'm like more of a pessimistic optimist, in that I'm like very optimistic about the world, yet extremely pessimistic at the same time. So in terms of how like I don't get depressed by research, I feel like I am someone whenever I am doing research, I am more focused on like the things I'm learning rather than the implications. And I kind of try to compartmentalize that, if that makes sense. So if I'm like researching, I focus on what information am I gathering? How is it gonna help me reach my goals or whatever I'm doing at the moment? And then leave myself some space after that to reflect on everything I've read.
And
Um,
one more question, and then you can
I
ask her. Uh, just when you are writing, do you have an idea you want to get across, where it's in your head, or do you just have the idea of the story and let that idea and theme just happen organically?
So I feel like this is something that has changed in my writing process. So when I was writing short stories, it was very much I have a very specific, like one line idea that I build around. And then I would just discovery write basically the whole story and sometimes jot down notes as they come to me about like what happens next. But usually I'll have like the first line and the last line of the story already set, and these two do not change. But for long form, I usually have an idea, but I have to think about it for like a year or so before I actually start writing. So it like percolates and then it complicates. It's kind of like when you have a philosophical question and you ask yourself that question, you have like an immediate answer. But as you like keep thinking about that question, you get like more and more answers and you're like, okay, but, and then it's like, but then, that type of thing. So in long form, that is what happens to the idea. It like consistently evolves. That's why I can't really outline properly. Or if I do have an outline, it like drastically changes. And usually my first three chapters will change a lot compared to like, in the short story, I have my first line and that's like the first line forever. But usually in my long form, I have like a very set ending in mind, and that is the ending I'm working towards.
Nice. That's interesting. Um, yeah, but you have been so prolific since you hit the scene. And I'm wondering two questions. First, how do you keep going? I know you said you do like 3 day sleepless writing times or something. And also, so how do you keep that going? And then I'd love to talk a little bit about your submission process because the first time I saw you put out your statistics for the year, I was feeling pretty good. I'd done like 80 submissions for the year, and you were like 565 or something. And I'd love to know a little more about that process for you. So first, um, yeah, Elizabeth, did you have a question?
Oh, no, sorry,
Sorry.
bird flew by.
So in terms of consistently putting output, I would say I am less consistent than I was when I started, I think, because I've become a lot more critical of myself. I think in the
Mhm.
beginning, because my focus was not so much getting published, but writing and writing a lot to improve my craft. So with each story, I tried to like improve from the previous story. So my thought process was like, okay, the more I write, the more I'll improve, and then the better my work will get. It doesn't really matter what the quality is at the beginning, as long as I know I'm consistently improving. Um, and I think because I wasn't really known back then outside of like submitting a lot, um, it was also kind of less pressure on me, I think, when I was writing. So I could really just focus on exploring my ideas, having fun with the work, and then trying to implement all the new craft things I was learning from like different resources online. One of them was like the Brander Sanderson lecture series on YouTube, but that was like more targeted towards novels. But then I try to like scale it down to fit short stories. Um, and in terms of the submission process, I have like a very compulsive and impulsive personality. So when I was doing submissions, I was like, oh, whatever market I see that's open, I will just send something there. And then as many as I can. And usually when one submission comes back, I will send like two or three out again, something like that.
Wow. And did you have a lot of the same stories that you were simultaneously submitting, if the markets allowed it, or were there a lot of new stories of the 500?
So a combination. From what I remember when I was doing short stories back in like 2020, 2021, I tried to write at least one short story a week or so. But then that would be like I used to write quite short though. So then they would range anywhere from like 1,000 to 3,000, and that would be like the upper bar. Usually they hovered around like 1.5 to 2,000 words type of thing. Um, but yeah, so like I would try to consistently write, and then usually I would have 25, I want to say, or so stories cycling in and out. So some of them are like at non-sime sub places, some of them are sub simultaneously, maybe up to like 10 different places.
Wow, that's amazing. Um, Elizabeth, did you have anything? I was just formulating an idea and it just went away. So,
Uh, well, I was just curious. You mentioned your agent. When did you start working with an agent, and how did you get your agent?
Let me think. So I believe it was July 2022 when I signed with my first agent. And that was actually on the spur of a moment where back then they had Pitch Dark on Twitter when it was still Twitter. Um, and so it's basically like a pitch event where you write like several short lines or like a one line pitch about your book and then like have a few hashtags based on its genre, its age category, things like that. And then an agent would come and or editors will come and like your pitch and then you can like send it to them, right? So at that day, I wasn't planning to pitch anything, but my friends were like, "Oh, well, you have so many short stories. Why don't you just like put a short story collection and pitch it?" And then I was like, "Okay," because like the year before that, I had done it wasn't pitch dark, but one of the variations of the pitch event because they have like different ones for YA and then romance, things like that. And I had gotten like zero likes. So I was not feeling very optimistic about it. But I was like, okay, I guess I'll just like throw a bunch of emojis together and then have like some brief lines based on the short stories in the collection and throw it out there. By that time, I did not have a short story collection, but I was like, okay, well, if there's interest, it's very easy to like just throw one together because it's you're not like starting from scratch type of thing, right? So then I did that, and then I got a lot of interest. I got like a few small press interest, and then a few agent interest, and then so that's basically how I got my agent was through the pitch event.
And have
and
you
did you
stuck with the
see?
same agent throughout? I mean, till now? Or did you
Uh,
change?
So I recently switched my agent in this February. So I have a new agent now.
Did things change dramatically for you after you won your first award, big award?
I feel like I I don't know. I don't know, like I cannot speak for like the public sense, how people like other people's perspective change, or like in terms of like considering my work, or like if my name has become more widespread, things like that. But I think for me personally, after winning the awards, there is both more pressure and less pressure, if that makes sense. And
Oh,
that
yeah.
there's more, yeah, like in that there's more pressure to produce higher quality work, to like constantly improve. But I feel like that has been a pressure that I've put on myself to begin with, even without the awards. Um, but like after winning awards, it's like, oh, more people might be keeping an eye on my work. So it's like you kind of want to keep the quality consistent. It's not like when I first started writing and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna just play, and if it's bad, it's bad type of thing. Um, but at the same time, I feel like it's also less pressure because one of my goals when I first started, well, eventually, not when I first started, maybe like a couple months in, etc., was like to win an award type of thing, right? But then it kind of like after winning the award made me kind of like reevaluate what my next goals are, right? If it's still like winning awards with my piece, or is it something else I want to do with my work, and what direction I'm working towards with my career.
That's great.
What's the
You also,
answer? Wait, you
oh,
don't want to know the
okay, go
answer.
ahead.
What's the answer? What are you working toward or your career?
I don't know. I feel like right now I want to, like, I do some very strange and experimental things in my work sometimes, and sometimes mainstream publishers may not want to take a risk on it, or it's like more unconventional than they anticipate it to be. But I kind of want that kind of work to be my author brand, if that makes sense, to kind of make it into the mainstream audience with this kind of work, rather than compromising and then reworking my style to better fit like the audience taste instead, which I think is like a hill I might die on, but you know.
I don't think so. I'm sure you're gonna make it work. You also do some teaching. You have workshops and things that pop up from time to time. Do you enjoy that?
So I have a very, very complicated relationship with teaching, I think, because from undergrad, I actually wanted to be a teacher, like a high school teacher type of thing. But back then, I was like, I want to be a high school teacher only because my parents will not let me become a writer, or like a baker or musician or something in the arts that they don't think will make me money type of thing, right? So I was like, okay. So I told them I will become an English literature teacher, and that was the only way they would let me to go into English lit. Um, but then as I was like, because I was also enrolled in like this teaching stream in my first year of university. So we did some like placements, and then we took pedagogy classes, things like that. And I realized I did not want to go into teaching, not because I didn't like it or things like that, but because of just how much pressure it is, like how difficult it is to like guide the next generation, and like knowing that if you slightly mess up, it will change the trajectory of their life forever. Because when I was in middle school, I had like this math teacher, and she was like the type of math teacher where if you have struggles in class, you go up to her and you ask, "Oh, can you like help me with this question?" She would just be like, "Go home and try harder." And then so it just makes a bunch of students not like math anymore, right? Because of her attitude towards like helping students and things like that. But then I also had teachers who were like very like hands-on, guides you step by step, and then makes you understand, like makes sure the whole class is on the same page before moving on. And like that also was a math teacher, and it made me enjoy math more because of it. So so I do enjoy teaching. I did it for a while before full-time writing. I did some tutoring, ESL, English lit type of thing. But it was a lot of pressure, not so much from the students, though that was like more on my side. I like really wanted to help my students, but sometimes the students did not want to help themselves type of thing, or like the students were only there because the parents were like, the grades are too low, it needs to be higher. And I was like, what do you mean? They have an 80. It's already pretty high. Anyways, but you know, subjectivity. But in terms of teaching writing, I really enjoyed it, but it like gave me imposter syndrome too, I think. Um, in the sense that I was like, do I really know what I'm talking about?
I think that's common, I think, with almost every teacher or everybody. I mean, we all suffer from imposter syndrome all the time, except maybe some narcissists and those kinds of people don't. But I think most of us go. And I always remember I just have to know maybe a little bit more than the people I'm talking to, or a different way of forming it, or speaking about it. So yeah, I totally get the imposter syndrome. So what do you have coming up next? Your novel, is that what you're working on? The follow-up to A Palace from Near the Sky, Near the Wind? I keep saying it wrong. Palace Near the Wind.
So the follow-up, A River from the Sky, has already been finished and turned in about 2-ish months ago. Yeah, so I'm probably gonna get the edits back for that soon. Um, but I actually have a debut novel coming out also with Titan next year in the fall, like September 2026. I guess link below.
Yes, yes. Well,
Um, yeah, I don't think the pre-order or like any of that is out yet, but we have the announcement link. I think it's with the bookseller, but that is coming out with Titan. It is also a duology, but it is like an unconventional duology in that it's not like the first book and the sequel, but it's like the first book is a standalone, and then I'm gonna do a prequel set like 1,000 years before the first book. So it's like a book one and then a book zero.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. That's great. Switching for a second, you play badminton kind of remarkably well. Do you, does that give you a break? Does that energize you?
So I was saying how like my brain is quite chaotic and it jumps around a lot. So I cannot sit still. I'm the type who's like, you know, when you're watching Netflix, you some people just watch it, right? Especially if you have like subtitles, you would have to like focus on it. But I'll watch Netflix, something with subtitles, like anime, a drama, you know, things like that. But I'll be playing Sudoku at the same time. And then at the same time, I'll probably be trying to think about like story ideas. So my mind becomes very scattered. But when I'm playing badminton, I cannot do any of that. So it's like very helpful for me to just like take a break from the chaoticness of my mind to like step away from writing and give me time to like just not think, or like not think, but like focus on just playing the sport and focus on what's happening in the court, and also socializing with people who are not writers. Not that writers are not great to socialize with, but it's like sometimes I just need to not talk about writing.
For sure, for sure. So if you were to have any advice to give to a not a writer starting out, what would you say to them? What would you think?
I would say be persistent, because
Mm,
this path takes a really long time, I think, and be clear on what, or not be clear on, but like have an idea about what your goal is in writing in general. Like whether it is you want to reach a very broad audience, whether it is you want to improve your craft for yourself and write something for yourself. Um, or whether it is even like aiming to win awards, things like that. But I think having a very clear, or not very clear, having an idea of what you want to work towards in your mind, I think will help make this journey feel a little less lonely.
And do you have a really great writing network that helps you as well throughout, getting through when you are stuck or just having people to talk to?
I think my network has really evolved like throughout my career in that like there are a lot of writing groups that I've joined when I began my writing career. Some of them I'm like not as active in as before. Some of them I might still have connections with, things like that. Um, and then writers now that I gravitate more towards, whether it is because we've become friends throughout the years or we are writing in a similar space and want to support each other in a similar space, or whether it's because we're writing in completely different spaces and want to learn from each other about those different spaces.
Well, okay.
And
Elizabeth.
I have one question then.
Yeah.
You said you have like you like to play, you're not easy to sit just still. What do you do when you're writing?
I think when I'm writing, I think that's the only time I'm really sitting still. But sometimes it takes a lot for me to get started. Like, I have to do a bunch of things to procrastinate on writing before I can get into writing. And sometimes the best writing I do is right before I have to leave the house, where like my husband's shouting in the background, it's like, we have to go grocery shopping in like half an hour. And I'm like, okay. And suddenly I can write like 500 words.
I think that's a constant for writers is there's the more than the writing is a procrastination. It's like suddenly, God, my house really needs cleaning.
Yep.
It's
I
the
was like,
sautéing of ideas, right?
By the
It's a
way,
little Pilates, but it's the sauté. You got to sit
I
there
have
and
this right by my in my writing desk so I can squeeze it between my legs when I'm writing. I find it helpful.
huh? Mine are
Magic.
on the wall. Um, I can see mine, but they're there. Yeah, I think that's common though. I mean, we all kind of get an idea and then it percolates, it sautés, you have to live with it. And I love what you were saying about, how it takes you a year to get down to writing your novels that you think of. I mean, it's such a developmental phase. You just sit there and, just churning away. Like you said, wait, there's this character or this character. He likes to play badminton. I mean, I don't know. It's neat. It's really neat.
Do you
So
have characters that play badminton?
it's
there is one. I've only written one badminton story so far in my career, and it was a horror story. I forgot, where was it published? But it was titled Little Bird, and it was kind of like a sports body horror-ish type of story.
Hmm.
do you see yourself? I mean, you're definitely speculative fiction. Do you see yourself leaning more toward horror? You have a lot of horror stuff out.
I feel like I am a mix of like sci-fi and horror, but my sci-fi I feel like isn't your like traditional hard sci-fi, but it feels more on like almost like a surreal side of sci-fi or like a science fantasy type of thing, where a lot
Okay.
of the science in my works are more like metaphorical or like philosophical versus things that can actually be implemented or like versions of it that exist already, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Totally. Oh, that's wonderful. Elizabeth, do you have any other questions? I'm just, I'm like sort of in awe to have I here. And is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered? Anything you want to tell people to look out for? We've got the book coming out. Any short stories or anything?
Yes, so have a few short stories and anthologies that have either been published already or are forthcoming this year. Um, a few of them include, so one of them is You, Human, Volume 2. And then what is it called? The Earth Bleeds at Night, Silk and Sinew. Um, Let me think. I feel like I'm forgetting a lot, but I will, but everything is on my website, essentially. If you go to the pros tab, you can see a list of my forthcoming works and things that have already been published.
Awesome. And we will have a link to I's website, of course.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope we can have you back. Maybe when your next novella comes out or your novel next fall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
would be exciting.
it's very exciting. It's very great.
Yeah,
It's great. It's
you
really
are you're someone to watch. It's very exciting to have you here, and we'll just keep an eye on your career and see what you come up with next with your genre, well, not genre bending, style bending novels. So it's great.
I
that is
will.
great.
And
So
now,
we always end with the best thing we learned this week. Uh, Trying to keep on the positive. So I have two things. One is definitely a great thing, which is there's been huge breakthroughs in fusion technology. One was at the Lawrence Livermore Labs with lasers, and the other was, ooh. I want to say Japan, and I might be wrong about that, so forgive me if I'm wrong. But it was designed, they were designing something for a video game, and they found it contains it might lead to being able to do fusion energy, which would be unlimited clean energy. So that's
oh,
a really good thing. And then
Oh.
this is my interesting thing, is that unborn babies were found to have this gene that they inherit from their father, IGF2, to force their mothers to release more nutrients during pregnancy. And it's the first evidence that a dad's gene allows his unborn child to make certain demands. They nicknamed it the greedy gene. And I just think there's something so, I don't know, poetic about
perfect.
the gene to
Perfect.
get from their dads.
You
That's all.
just reminded me, I wasn't going to use this as my best stuff because I don't know enough about it. But there was a new that they've discovered. I read somewhere they've discovered a new blood type, but only one person has it. So I do want to read more about that. And I wonder,
Oh,
I
yeah,
saw
they
that
said, but
too.
one human has it. That's so weird. Were they alien? I don't know. It's very interesting. But actually, my best thing was just I found out that one of my stories made it into the best of anthology for Small Wonders for year one. So I was excited to hear that. You know, it's always nice when you open your email and there's just a surprise you're not expecting it. So that was lovely. So that's my little best.
And link below to
And
check out
link
Andrea's
below. Yes,
story and
yes.
book. Yay.
I, what did you learn this week?
so it was on a panel I was just on yesterday, actually. And it was Ray Naylor talking about like languages. I hope I do not misparaphrase, but people please check your sources because I feel like every time I learn something, I still know like nothing about the thing. But it was basically about how like dolphins use sonar to communicate and how they are essentially well, not projecting, but kind of like sharing images with each other when they are communicating versus for us it's like spoken language and words, right? um, and then the other thing is there was a drone show, the first one, the first pet friendly fireworks show in Canada, that just happened recently. And it was basically fireworks, but with drones. So
Yeah.
then there's like no loud noises for pets. Um, and interconnected with that, they had like a citywide drone show in Shenzhen in China, and I think it broke the Guinness World Record for the most drones in that drone show. I think it was something like 11,000 drones.
Yeah, I keep hoping they will change more and more fireworks to drones because it's similarly fun and so much better for the environment. I woke up here today and the sky was like just a hazy, mucky sky from the all the fireworks last night. So, well, again, thank you, for coming and being with us today. And we want to thank Maria Korolov and Alex Korolov for both producing and editing our piece. And Elizabeth, she's like,
Yeah.
what?
And join us on Patreon if you want to support new fiction. We use all the funds to publish new fiction, and we also pre-print reprints. And Andrea and I also narrate stories. So if you want to listen or read some great new speculative fiction, come on over to metastellar.com and visit us there.
And
And
check out Elizabeth's book, which is behind her, Gods and Monsters, published by MetaStellar. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you next time.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you
Bye.
again for having
Thanks.
me.
Bye. Thank you.